Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism with myself, Adam Piercy, and my co-host, Mick Mulroy. Today we wanted to talk about parenting, this is a theme around parenting and children and being a parent that you see a lot throughout Stoicism, right? Marcus Aurelius was a parent, and he actually lost many of his children while they were in their childhoods, and even some adult children later, before his own passing. And Seneca talks about children as well. He consoles someone in, I think it's letter 99, for loss of a child. We're not going to talk about loss today only, but it's, being a parent and having children is definitely a thread that runs consistently through the works of Stoicism. Basically, from at least the big three, but also in general. So Mick, love to hear your opening thoughts on this one, as you are a parent.
I am. I'm a parent of children. I'm a parent, a godparent of godchildren, and I was a foster parent of a foster child. So I've kind of, whether I was good at it or not, I guess it's still a work in progress, but I certainly have had a lot of practice. So, and I do think, actually you brought up Marcus Aurelius. If you think about meditations, one of the first things he does at the beginning is thank a lot of his relatives, right? For basically being there for him and shaping who he was. Yeah. So that's where I'd start. And I took kind of notes because, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I think as a Stoic, there's a lot of things that you can do to set your kids, and not just your kids, but also, young people that you have influence on, right?
Yeah.
Up for success. And the first one, which is very much in line with multiple Stoics' view on this, is to set the example, right? Yeah. And parents fall into this trap: do as I say, not as I do. It's very easy, but ultimately, kids do what you do. I think psychologically, you could probably show that you can say all the right things over and over again, but your actions probably speak more to your kids' influences than your words. Right. And that can be positive or negative, right? If you are a virtuous person, which obviously if you're a Stoic, you're at least trying to be, you can impart that on them through actions, and the famous, I'm sure we've quoted it many times, but, basically to paraphrase it, spend no more time talking what it's like to be a good man and be one, right? So that's where I'd start. But also remember that if you do negative things, if you're abusive and stuff, you tend to impart the negative stuff, onto your kids. And then there's a cycle. So I'd start with, you really have to get yourself in order to be I think a good parent. And that starts with, it's not just Stoicism. There's all sorts of ethical frameworks, moral frameworks, religion, non-religious. But that, I think you really have to show that you are the type of person that you want your kids to be, right? Don't rely on, other people to be the representation that you want your kids to be. You have to start. Now, there'll be plenty of other influences on your kids, but they're first going to look at you, right?
Yeah.
That's who they see, and your spouse, of course, or your
partner.
Partner.
Absolutely. I think in many ways, right? I think there's a quote I try to come back to a lot of the time when I'm dealing with somebody who's having a challenging time, or sometimes with kids. I mean, I'm not a parent. I have had the opportunity to be a parental figure for many different kids in life and be a godfather myself. But the thing is, excuse me. But the thing is that for me, I think, I come back to this quote all the time of like, or it's not really a quote. I think it's sort of a lesson, which is like, be tough on yourself and easy on others, right? Like in many ways, I think about it like, you can't do everything for your kids too. You should set the example. You should be tough on yourself live virtuously and whatnot. But I've always learned as well, like, you got to give them a little space to kind of screw up, right? Like, and I do this a lot with some of my students that work for me in the team that I lead, where you kind of go like, I want you to figure this out, and then they screw it up, and you go, yeah, I figure that might happen, but that's okay.
Mhm.
But you're right. I think you have to set that example, and that's the thing that I think we have a responsibility for, and we always will probably. So
Yes. And, there's the other thing that I think you should take into account is that ultimately your kids and are certainly going to be their own independent person. There's no possession there, right?
no,
There is the ability to influence. There's the ability, in a positive way, hopefully. There's the
yeah,
ability um, to really look after them. And looking
yeah,
after them doesn't mean like, there's a lot of talk now about helicopter parents, and I guess it's been going on for a while,
yeah,
where parents think their job is to give their kids everything that they could ever want and to tell them that they're, you know, basically beyond reproach, right? When we all know
right,
that that's not the case. Every person isn't the
no,
best at everything, and material, possessions shouldn't be what you are actually teaching them matters, right? So I think, and those are both very
yeah,
stoic,
yeah,
right?
sure,
So you, I don't think that is setting up kids for success. You're seeing this a lot, where kids grow up thinking this, and then they get into the real world and they find out that they're not the best at everything, and they don't get a trophy just
right,
for showing up.
right,
And you're having parents that are like calling, and now they're even not even kids, but young adults bosses, and talking to them as if they should
yeah,
be
I
a
know,
part of that. And that is not only inappropriate, it's not set your kids up for success. It's really showing them that the wrong thing. It's really showing them that they are should be entitled. They should
yeah,
worry about material things. I think what you and I have a raise character, not comfort. I think you
mm-hmm,
really have to raise the child, with character. That is ultimately your job,
yeah,
and it is not to coddle them. And I know this. I mean, it's very much a stoic thing, but you got to
mm-hmm,
make them tough. I know that might be controversial,
yeah,
and I'm sure my kids are like, "Oh yeah, that's my dad." And I'm not talking great Santini tough, right? I'm not saying being
yeah,
abusive. I mean, you should be caring and nurturing and all that,
yeah,
but you, the world isn't easy. And if you're just going to be a friend to your kids, they're going to have a lot of friends. You got to be a parent. And that's not just
right,
being a friend. That means you got to tell them right for wrong. You got to hold them accountable. You got to show them
yeah, yeah,
responsibility. You got to show them humility. And you got to show them physical and mental and emotional toughness, because life for everybody, nobody escapes the hardships of life. It's
right,
literally impossible. And I'm
yeah,
not saying you make them into some impervious soldier, but you got to make them ready to take on the hardships of life, to be able to experience it. You're going to get knocked down in life.
yeah,
The question isn't whether you're getting knocked down, it's whether you're getting back up. That's coming from the parents. It's also going to come from coaches
yeah,
and other people but they're going to look not only for you to help them with this, but to actually be the example, man. They're going to see
yeah.
you get knocked down, and they're going to see how you react, and they're going to, hopefully see the right example.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the concept of justice really applies here, right? Like, you should treat them fairly, right? But you shouldn't be mean to them. Like I have seen mean parents, right? I have seen
Oh
mean
yeah.
parents where it is like you are breaking a sort of sacred trust with you and the kid, right? But I think more what we're talking about here is a kind of a tough love type of circumstance, and I think the Stoics, that would really resonate with them, that idea, right? It's like, yeah, you're gonna have to do some hard stuff sometime. I mean, Stoics will always talk about, like, you are entitled to the fruit of you are entitled to the labor, but not the fruits of your labor, right? And every kid who's played in the championship and missed the shot, and
Yep.
or flubbed a pass and whatever, right? Those are the people
Uh-huh.
who In many ways, I think come out stronger in the end because they've realized, as you've said, that everybody has an opportunity to fail. Right? It doesn't matter who you are. I feel I'll just quickly talk about like I was watching somebody recently talking about how when they did their first Ironman in Kona in Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, what I wasn't expecting was like when we started the bike ride, right? There was no music." Like the ESPN movie they always do, right? There was no music,
Right.
and I was like, I'm in the middle of a lava field by myself, and they were sort of like, it really doesn't fit with what I expected. And you kind of go, well, yeah, because that's the hard work part, right? And I
That's
think I
right.
think we're kind
I've
of
been
there
there.
right now sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'd love to make sure that we touch on one big thing, which is I think a common misconception that people have about Stoicism in regards to kids, which is this idea of like imagining that they might not be around tomorrow, right? And for the Stoics, they had a very different world than we lived in, and we live in a world where, you know, we are you and I come from very stable locations. We have food, we have shelter, we have all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, um, you read this Stoic writings about thank the universe for your kids because they're not going to be there tomorrow. Essentially, that's what Marcus Aurelius is talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
interestingly for him, like that was reality. For them, the common cold could take out a person in an instant, right? And I'd love to get your take on this idea of it, because on this idea of thanking the universe more, not the idea that they're going to die tomorrow. That feels very nihilistic and
Mm-hmm.
macabre to most people. But what's your take on that kind of concept that the Stoics have of like you have to be able to say thank you, for them being here and remember that they may not be here tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's what you should do for everything you love in life. And I actually have not a death, thank goodness, but an experience of losing a child in a sense. And what I mean by that is we had a foster child, right? So, and that person or had a very rough go of it,
Yeah.
and that's why he ended up with us. By the end of his time with us, we actually wanted to adopt. It's a longer story, but where we were in Africa. We weren't allowed to. If you foster under the law there, you can't adopt the same person. Don't know why. It's not that relevant, but that's how
Yeah.
this happened, and we had to give him up, right? Uh, that was excruciating, and if it
Yeah.
wasn't for the absolute saints of people who ended up adopting him, we would have lost contact forever. But literally, we never would have
Right.
seen him again, heard from him again, found out what
Yeah.
happened to him. So we had that experience, and it was excruciating. Obviously, especially for my wife. But um, I think back that you know none of that was about me, right?
Right.
We had the opportunity to help a young child, infant actually, and who was in a very bad situation that basically been abandoned, was in an orphanage. And now it's
Okay.
just proud to see him as a fan from the sidelines, right? Um,
Right.
Being successful, everything that his parents, his
Yeah.
parents now, his actual parents, have done for him, but just to be appreciative of the fact that we contributed something.
Yeah.
And I think it really goes to this whole idea is you don't possess your kids, right? You have them, you uh, help raise them, you hopefully set the right example. I think you teach them what they need in life, but ultimately
Yeah.
their own person. And this uh, JJ is what we call them. Um, it's just proud to see from afar how he's turned out. And now we're hearing that like he asked about us because he has a memory and everything. And
Sure.
he was a toddler, but
Yeah.
when he
Yeah.
left, but um, that would be my. And I hope, obviously, I hope nobody does, but unfortunately, that's not the
Yeah.
case. Ever lose a kid, but that was as
Yeah.
close as we came because if it wasn't really for, because a lot of people would say, look, we don't want you to have any contact with the foster parents
Sure.
anymore because we want to be the parents, and they are the parents. But I guess the maturity level of these people was just
Yeah.
so high, and yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I will always remember. And then like my god children, Um, I mean, there's a lot of godparents and children. Mine are
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
Gold Star children, right? So their fathers died in service to their
Yeah.
country, right? They're both buried in Arlington, and they're memorialized on the wall at Langley.
Right.
So it's a different
Right.
relationship, and it's one that you know you'd hope no kids would ever have to endure, is the loss of a parent. And to be a parent figure,
Yeah.
godparent, I guess, not I guess, a godparent, it's a different kind of relationship, right? So
Yeah.
it's both keeping the memory of their father alive for sure, but also trying to the best you can, um, not only raises help raise them,
Yeah.
but help raise them in the way that I think would also be consistent with what their dad would want, right? Because I'm basically a
Sure.
surrogate there.
Yeah.
That's what godparents are. But I think as a Stoic, you have an absolute obligation to raise your kids under the idea that virtue is way more important than status. It's too much,
Yeah.
especially in probably both Canada, but certainly in the United States, where your status is what people think makes them or not. Like what you
Yeah.
own, what your job is. That is setting people up for success. And quite frankly, some of the most, quote unquote, successful people are also some of the least happy people. You
Mm.
have to get a foundation for
Yeah.
a kid to be a healthy, well-rounded adult, and it can't be tied. It shouldn't be tied, in my opinion, to material wealth or status as somebody that people think is important. You can be both of those things. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yes. Yes.
But if that's what you tie your self-worth to, I just think that's a mistake. And I think that's what parents should teach is virtue over status.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I mean, I don't want to. I want to make sure we pull on one quick thread here, though, which is the idea of parenting being from those that are not just people that are your biological parents, right? I think,
Right.
you and I seem to have a lot of nephews or nieces or god kids or people friends who have kids. I don't have any kids of my own. I have been lucky in my recent life to have had kids in my life that are very important to me, right? And will always be. And I think, it's interesting because it's that idea of like, I think a Stoic would definitely sit there and say, your obligation to those kids doesn't stop just because you're not biologically their parent, showing up, listening, being a good example, all of those things I think is very very much within the Stoic purview of like what you can do as a person. Because I think it's easy sometimes to sort of be like, well, I'm the fun uncle, and all I do is take them out for candy, and that's it. And I'm the one who's kind of like, in for my two nephews, I'm one of the few male role models in their lives, and so for me it always feels like it's something that's much more important, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me to be a certain way, because I have to remember that for them, like, they don't see as many people that look like me. You know what I mean, as it were. And so I think, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because I know you have a lot, because you have your extended kid group is quite
Mm-hmm.
big, right? And I think that's something that's really important to talk about, is that this responsibility does not stop extending outwards. I know we talked recently about the circles of Hierocles, right? With like, yourself and then your immediate
Mm-hmm.
family and da da da.
Mm-hmm.
Those other kids, like, I have lots of friends with kids who call me Uncle Rocket, and I'm not Uncle anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm not biologically their uncle, but they just know me. And that would very nicely, a friend of mine said to me that I was like this big friendly giant that, although I'm 5'7", it's like, you're just this really good model for them. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I think that's something important. But I mean, you have kids yourself, like, they must have really strong role models that are not just yourself, though you're probably a great one.
And I hope they would, right? I mean, you should also, I think, embrace the fact that your kids need as much fans as they can have, right? Yeah, like
Yeah.
you should be jealous that somebody else is a good role model for your kids. You should
Yeah.
you should be like, thank goodness, right? If the person is a good role model, right? Um,
Yeah.
but Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, some people say, well, I don't have kids, so I'm really, you know, you could have an influence on society through a lot of different
Yeah.
ways. You could be a
Yeah.
big brother or a big sister. You can teach, you can volunteer, you can, like where I live, it's called the Sparrow House. It's where all these kids are basically waiting to find foster homes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I'm sure that's all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, take the time to be that mentor, take the time to give
Yeah.
back. Cause ultimately, a quote we use probably too much, but the hive quote by Marcus Aurelius, right? We're part of a
Yeah.
hive.
Sure.
We're part of a hive. And
We are. Yeah.
you're part of a society, and your society. And I think what every generation should do is try to make the next generation better. And better doesn't mean softer or like,
Right.
have everything you ever wanted in life. Better means like smarter, like more emotionally stable and prepared
Right.
for the trials that are going to be in front of it. That's why I kind of do focus. I mean, I'm a Marine and all that stuff, but I kind of focus on the toughness because I just have a feeling that there's going to be big trials and tribulations ahead of
Mm-hmm.
humanity.
Sure.
And raising people that are soft and emotionally not prepared to deal with it is not doing them any favors. So I
Yeah.
think people should uh, want to give back. I think people should give back, and one of the best ways to do it is to be that mentor. You're
Yeah.
Everybody goes through life and learns something, hopefully, right? So there is something that you can do that you can relay to a kid,
Yeah.
right? I mean, hell, even if you think about it, like how many times have people said, I wish I could go back and tell myself in middle school that all that crap really doesn't matter, right? Well, you can. You could tell some other kid,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody has their issues in life, right? I mean, especially growing up. But you just wish that somebody could
Yeah.
explain to the young people today,
Yeah.
hey, you know, don't pay attention to that social media crap. People don't look like that in reality. And even if they do
Right.
and you don't, so what? Right. And, there's so many things that you can do that's small that could actually change a perspective of a kid. And I had some quotes because I like
Yeah.
giving some quotes, and I didn't use Stoics in this because we do that all the time. But Frederick Douglass, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Right. So
Yeah.
you do have, I think, an obligation to help society, and society is founded on the next generation,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is something that everybody can contribute to, whether you have biological children or not. I don't even know that that's any more relevant than
Yeah.
either adopting a child, fostering a child, or just being a mentor in some capacity to a
Mm-hmm.
child.
Yeah. So, I think I want to tell a quick story here, which is something that I did that was like this, where I had someone in my life who had two girls, and they were away for a week, and I made a choice while the girls were at home being looked after by their grandparents. I said to that person, I said, can I maybe hang out with them a little bit while you're gone? And they said, sure. And so the second time I saw them that week, it was a Friday, and I said, you know what? I have an opportunity here as a man, as a person, to show them what they should be treated like, how they should be treated, how they
Mhm.
should be respected. And so I said to the girls, I said, you know what? I'm going to take you out for dinner on Friday, and I think you should dress up, and I'm going to dress up, and I'll pick you up, and I'll tell you what time to be there, right? And I showed up, and they were dressed up, and I was dressed up, and I brought them flowers. I brought them each a bouquet of flowers. I also bought their grandmother a bouquet of flowers just to be nice. But I was basically trying to explain to them, like, this is a good thing to do for people. Like, you can show people compassion and be nice to them in all those ways. And you should be, I maybe I set the bar a little too high, but at the same
Mhm.
time, right? It's like, why shouldn't we be looking for something that's that positive, right? From that. And so you can be a role model for people that aren't your own kids, right? For
Oh
example.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I'm not looking for accolades on that. I in many ways I feel like I was doing what I was supposed to do, was just to be a good person and show them that. But that was a very special time for me because I got to do something for two little girls that I don't know that they'd really had that happen before. Does it make me special? No, but is it something that I'm proud of? Yeah, I think so. So there
Yeah.
you go.
And there is something about a girl dad, right? You want to
Yeah,
show them what they should not only expect, which they should demand in a
yeah,
man,
yeah.
right? And
Totally,
I
totally
think
agree.
most men knows that. There's in every male there's a dude and a dad. I think somewhere in there. Um,
Yeah,
and
I
the
get
older
it.
you get, the more dad. Believe me, the more dad you get.
Yeah,
And I don't mean that like in the sense that you biological, but like your mind is
yeah,
just more
yeah. It's a
becomes
mindset
a
thing.
dad,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
Keep that in mind. Like they're going to look at how not only how you treat them, because most dads obviously treat their daughters
Of
like
course,
princesses, but how you
of
treat
course.
their mother,
Yep,
right? That's also showing them how a man behaves, and your son,
totally.
and your son, right? If I mean, you
Yeah.
should just treat your spouse well anyway,
Well,
but it's
yes,
just an additive
absolutely.
incentive. You are the model for both. What your
Yeah,
daughter will think is the norm, and what your son will think is the norm,
yeah,
and maybe that will uh, help you influence how you act to your spouse.
totally. And when I look at this, I think it's important to now kind of take a step take a step back in the conversation and say, so what if you look the other way, right? Like we are talking a lot about us operating as parental figures, but also like how does it play out when we're looking at it the reverse direction, when we're looking not backwards but like upwards to our own parent, like if it was a family
Mm-hmm.
tree. Because
Mm-hmm.
one of the key things that you pointed out at the beginning, which is a great thing to point out, is Marcus thanks his parental figures before he does anything else in meditations, right? He's thanking Antoninus Pius, it's his adoptive father, but he's thanking him anyways because the whole point. I'll give a quick history for everybody. Hadrian wanted Marcus to eventually be emperor, so Hadrian adopted Antoninus Pius, who was like in his 50s or 40s or something like that, and then
Mm-hmm.
adopted Marcus, who was in his 20s, I think it was. So that, like, they said the whole point was when Hadrian adopted Antoninus, who adopted Marcus. And the thing is, though, is what's interesting is Marcus cites Antoninus like far more than anybody. He never actually mentions Hadrian in the meditations. He only mentions
Right.
Antoninus Pius, and I think his own family and stuff. But he says, "Thank you to Antoninus for like showing me, calm demeanor and all of this stuff." And I remember thinking, like, well, how would that apply in this conversation? And so, in many ways, what I would tell people is when you're looking at your parenting style, being a parent, maybe you're not a parent yet, maybe you're never going to be a parent, and you just have kids in your life that are from other people that you want to put a good um, you want to be a good role model for. I think it would be it's always important to kind of look back on your own past and look on those others, and you say, well, I would like to embody that part of it, right? I would love to embody that part of it. And I think that's very important. I was, you know, I have been very lucky in my life to have older male figures at times who have showed me things that I wanted to embody in myself. Do I do it very well every day? No. I try very hard. But other times I kind of just, say, well, but I'm trying to be that way. And so I think it's a very important exercise for anybody working in a role model
Mm-hmm.
type environment to kind of look at at the people above them in the family tree and say, what would I want from them, or even what would I not want from them? Because it's very clear that Marcus is trying not to be Hadrian. Because Hadrian like stabs a guy in the eye one time when he gets angry
Yeah.
and all this other stuff, and
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Marcus
Sure
is
did.
going, I'm okay. I don't want to be
Right.
like that.
Right.
So, but
Right.
what's your take on this, right? Because you're obviously you have spoken before about your own father, right? You guys seem to have a
Oh
really
yeah.
great relationship, and also you being in the military, there's always a seniority thing. So where do you pull from when it comes to asking yourself
Well,
how you
both of
want to
my
be?
parents. I talk about my dad a lot, especially on this because he
Yeah,
was a Stoic, right?
or yeah, we're
So,
talking about
but
man a lot, but you're right,
yeah,
totally. It's
yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Yep.
But my mom was is exceptional and uh, incredible work ethic. Very, very hard worker with zero complaint. I guess my dad was the same way, but if I was really high side, I really think I got that from her, and I think my kids do too. And she's just a little tiny lady, but just
Yeah.
absolutely a great mother. My dad, he had the
What did your mom do?
persona.
If you don't
Well,
mind
she
my
was a
asking, what
nurse.
did your mom
Yeah,
do? She was a nurse.
she
Oh,
was a
that's
nurse.
right. Okay.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
decades and decades and decades. Maternity nurse, right? So like she'd say, the best part of the hospital, right? Most people in the hospital aren't there for like good reasons, right?
They're there
But
because
she
it's a
was a
bad
maternity
day.
nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's like the
Okay.
best part of a hospital, right? It's babies
Oh,
being born and
cool.
stuff, right? Yeah.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yep, that she loved it. And then my dad, he was he was a priest. I think you know that, right? So he had that
Yeah.
persona, right? So it's always something like if there's something that I felt like I was missing or falling
Yeah.
short, it was that very calm demeanor,
Yeah.
and um, anybody would want to talk to him. He was somewhat introverted like me, or he was introverted like me, but he had that way about him. I don't know if it came from being a priest or not, but like my friends would come over, knock on the door, and want to talk to my dad, right? Like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And just because that he had that, so I always wanted that to be something I could possess too, whether I do or not. It's up for somebody else to decide, but.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think people, and the other thing, and this isn't specific to my parents, but kids should be a little easier on their parents. And what I mean by that
Yeah.
is you kind of view things growing up as if your parents are just adults, right? They just
Yeah.
are like a static thing. And again, it's not about my parents, but
Yeah.
people grow up after they're already adults too, right? You don't
Yes.
stop
Yes.
maturing. So I
Mm-mm.
always thought that kids could view their childhood as something that happened in a progressive thing along with their parents, right? You learn stuff we had kids young.
Yeah.
I was like 25 or 26, which is now almost
Yeah.
unheard of. My wife was like 23. But you grow up at the same time. The same time you're raising kids, right? It doesn't stop. So um, that's another thing I think. Maybe I'm talking to my kids, right?
Yeah.
To keep into mind as as you go older. But ultimately, I think there is a part
Yeah.
of every parent that, and I just saw this quote. I can't remember who it was on social media thing, but like your dad, it was another guy talking about his dad. Your dad is like the one guy that you absolutely know wants you to be better than him.
Right.
You know, like
Yeah.
it's true. It's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear the words, you go, "Oh yeah, it's right." I'm not saying your friends don't want you to succeed and all that stuff, but like at least the way I viewed fatherhood, he is that you want your kids to be better than you. And I don't mean like morally, I mean everything. You want them to succeed more than you. And I think
Yeah.
and whether you're dad or mom, I'm just talking about it from my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but
Sure.
I think that's very important. You,
Yeah.
they have to believe that, and it has to be true. I
Yeah.
think that's
Sure.
one of the, and again, I'm not talking like, hey, he's got a fancier house or car or any of that kind of crap. I'm talking like you want them to be better rounded, better educated, you know,
Yeah.
uh, on every front.
For
And
sure.
and in many ways, it's up to you to do that. You can't hand it off to somebody else. You can't phone in being
Yeah.
a parent.
No, you can't. But I think, you raise a good point about this, right? Like the way I like to remind things when people talk about parents or my own challenges with adults or whatever, it's that they're just older humans is how I have said it to people. They're just older
Yes, that's
human beings. They're
exactly what I
not,
meant. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And sometimes I end up telling people like, everyone can be an adult, but not everyone is a grown up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and that sounds really weird to some people, but I really think that matters, right? Like, there have been times, right, where, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm special, but there have been times where I'm in a group setting where, you know, many people in there have 10, 20, 30 years on me in terms of experience in the space program or something like that. But sometimes I'm the one who has to say, you know, we're not in line here. Like, you guys are off in la la land if you think this is going to work, right? And I say this a lot to some of the younger students that I work with, for example. And I'm not a parent. I'm not their parent. I am not anything like that. But it is something where you're in a you're an authority figure, I would say, where you step into that role if you ignore the parent side of it, where it's your job to say, it's your job to show like that just because they're 20 or 21 doesn't mean they can't pipe up at a meeting with a bunch of senior directors of the entire thing, the entire program or whatever, and say, look, I think this is wrong. And I think, this is one of those things where you just have to take that responsibility to show that on. And we're talking a lot about responsibility, but parenting is a responsibility, right? Some people would say it's an obligation, but in many ways, as human beings, we can kind of control when it happens or doesn't happen, right? But, I think overall, I tell so many people, it's like, you just have to look at everybody else as an older human being, and they're not all grown-ups. They're all adults. Like, they are over 18. They can, if they're over 19 in Canada, they can drink and buy cigarettes, right? But ultimately, that doesn't mean that they know how to handle this situation better than you or whichever. So, I grew up with parents who were, my father was an accountant by training, but he worked in finance. And then my mom was a professional opera singer. And they're still kind of doing things like that now. They're not fully retired yet either. But, there are aspects of each of them that I am happy to have, and there's aspects where you're like, well, I'd like to be better next time, and that's kind of how this all comes together, right? Is that you just have to say, my experience with my parents, unless they were truly doing horrible things, which that's a whole other story. Mine weren't. Doesn't sound like yours were either.
No.
But you can take those as a lesson learned. But you're right. A parent should always be able to sit there and say, hey, I just want you to have more than I had, or I just want you to end up better than I was, right? So, and I've been very lucky, just as I think you probably have as well. But we're also one of the reasons why we feel confident talking about this in a podcast is because we both have been very lucky, I think, in our lives. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. But I had a conversation with a student who was really freaking out recently, and they were sort of like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do after university, and my mom and dad want me to go into grad school. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they were like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you should probably figure that out. And they were like, well, but I'm supposed to go to grad school. I was like, well, you're not supposed to do anything. Like, you have to choose, right? And that's okay for you to choose. Right. And you might be choosing something that's contrary to what your parents want, but they're not living in this life, right? And that's okay. And they'll understand that at the end of the day. They will understand that. Working in engineering and working in the space program, you get a lot of familial pressure, right? Because it's like the biggest thing we could ever do. And I hate to, I don't want to say that, I don't want to speak for you at all, but like, I'm sure there are times in military families where someone doesn't want to go into the military, but they feel like they're obligated to. Do you think that happens? Like, do you think that's something that happens?
Yeah, for sure. I think, hopefully my son is in the military, right?
Yes,
I hopefully didn't feel like he had to do it. He's very good at it.
He seems to be doing pretty well at it, though. Yeah, as you were saying.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point you make, Adam. So I do think as a parent, you have to be careful not to impose either what you think your kids should do or what you really wanted to do, and now you want to make your kids like mini-me's, right? That's that's not the right way to parent. And I don't pretend to be giving everybody else advice on parenting. I'm some kind of expert, but I do think it's opinions. It would be, I think, most people's opinion that you should let your kids decide what they want to be as adults, not you. Now, if you set a great example and they want to be like you, then potentially take that as a big compliment. But if you're forcing, and I deliberately tried not to talk about it too much. But when your kid's interested in what there's a reason why kids end up doing a lot of what their parents do. Sometimes it's just convenience, and sometimes it's admiration, right? So, and you of course can help them in that area because you're in the area. So it does make sense, but I certainly think you should make sure that you're not the one actually dictating what they do for their life.
Yeah, and I think again that's why it's hard on yourself and easy on others. Is I think key in a kid's world, right? Like, and there were some new books that came out recently about I can't remember the titles, but it was sort of about like getting your kid off the phone and then get it, allowing them to kind of screw up, and they do learn a lot more from that. And I think that's kind of where we are, right? Is this circumstance now where we're providing good examples, we're providing, good things. At some point, like we don't get to pick what they do. They have to be their own human beings, right? They have to be their own people, kind of figure that out. And I think that's really important. So
I have to ask you, my friend, before we go back into being mortal enemies, how much time do we have left in the gold medal game? Because we have to watch the end of this.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's a minute and a half left in the third, and it's tied 1-1. So I'm happy to wrap up here. I think we covered a lot of really good topics today. This is another one though where I think we would very, like, we always want this on our podcast, but I would love to hear from people on parenting. And how have you tried applying Stoicism to your parenting? A friend of the podcast is Brittany Polat, who wrote a book about Stoicism and parenting. And we'd love to hear from you on that stuff, because, for both of us, we have kids in our lives and we have some experience and would love to hear from others. So info@pubandporch.com, or write in the comments, or Twitter. Twitter is @pubandporch. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Would love to hear that. But Mick, any closing thoughts for today?
No, I mean, I think other than to reiterate what I already said, which is, if you have an opportunity to be a parent, it's unbelievable. If you have an opportunity to mentor a kid, it's also unbelievable. Yeah. And it's something that I think we all have a moral obligation to try to do. And that's totally agree. Would be my closing comments.
Okay. Well, let's sign off for today. Thank you, everybody. Would love to hear from you. And Mick and I are going to watch some hockey now. So cheers, Mick.
Salancha. Thank you for listening to the Pub and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pubandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pubandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.